It's not Sydney. It's not Melbourne. It's not even Brisbane. The most expensive places to rent in Australia today aren't necessarily its biggest cities. Instead, they're small coastal towns, remote mining communities, and tourist hotspots where the cost of living has exploded in ways few anticipated. Welcome to the new housing crisis, one playing out far from the skyscrapers, in the quiet towns where locals are being priced out of the very communities they helped build. Let's dive into the untold story of Australia's most expensive towns for renters and why it matters more than you might think. When COVID-19 swept across the globe, something unusual happened in Australia. As lockdowns reshaped the way we lived and worked, tens of thousands of Australians began migrating away from capital cities. They were searching for something quieter, more spacious, more affordable. This exodus was so significant it's now referred to as the Great Escape. Between the year 2020 and 2023, over 60,000 people left Sydney alone for regional New South Wales. Victoria saw a similar story, with thousands leaving Melbourne behind for country towns. And what did that do to rents? In short, it exploded them. According to CoreLogic, regional rents grew by a staggering 33% between the years 2020 and 2024, compared to 24% in capital cities over the same period. For some small towns, that growth was even more extreme. The question is, where did this impact hit the hardest? 1. Byron Bay. Byron Bay is often romanticized. Celebrities, beachfronts, spiritual retreats. But for locals, the vibe has changed, and not for the better. What was once a sleepy surf town with a laid-back charm has transformed into one of Australia's most unaffordable rental markets. In 2024, the median weekly rent in Byron hit a staggering $1,080 for houses. That's higher than inner Sydney, where the average sits closer to $850 per week. Let that sink in. A town of just 9,000 people now rivals the most expensive real estate in the country. So, what went wrong? Byron became the epicenter of the so-called sea change movement, an influx of remote workers, wealthy investors, and city dwellers seeking escape during and after the pandemic. Combined with a booming Airbnb economy, it created a perfect storm. According to the Byron Shire Council, over 20% of the town's housing stock is now short-term holiday accommodation. The consequences? Dire. Rents skyrocketed, and long-term availability plummeted. Teachers, nurses, cafe workers, the people who keep the town functioning, are being forced into vans, sofa surfing, or commuting from towns over an hour away. Byron may still look idyllic, but beneath the surface, it's grappling with a deep housing crisis that's driving its own community out. 2. Exmouth. Now let's head west to Exmouth in Western Australia. Tucked beside the World Heritage-listed Ningaloo Reef, Exmouth is both breathtaking and deeply isolated. Known for its coral reefs, whale sharks, and ecotourism, this tiny coastal town with a population of just 2,800 has become one of the most unaffordable places to rent in the country. In 2024, the median weekly rent for a house in Exmouth soared to $970, more than double the national median, which hovers around $550. The drivers behind this spike are unique, but increasingly common across regional Australia. Exmouth has faced a double squeeze: rapid tourism growth increasing short-term demand, and a chronically underdeveloped housing sector unable to keep up. Supply chain issues, high construction costs, and a shortage of tradies have delayed or cancelled much-needed housing developments. A 2023 report from the WA Department of Planning warned that Exmouth's housing supply was inadequate for both seasonal workers and permanent residents, contributing to what many now call a permanent housing emergency. The human toll is severe. 3. Noosa. Noosa has long been a playground for the wealthy: luxury resorts, high-end boutiques, and multi-million-dollar beachfront homes. But lately, it's also become a battleground for renters. Situated on Queensland's Sunshine Coast, Noosa's natural beauty and lifestyle appeal have driven housing demand to unsustainable levels. By early 2024, the median weekly rent in Noosa hit $950, a staggering 40% increase since 2020. That puts it on par with Sydney's inner suburbs, despite being a town of just over 55,000 people. Behind the glossy real estate listings and Instagrammable vistas lies a community under pressure. A 2023 housing needs assessment by the Noosa Shire Council found that over 1,000 residents were living in insecure or temporary housing situations, ranging from couch surfing to sleeping in cars and even tents. And while tourism continues to pump millions into the local economy, the workers who serve the cafes, clean the hotels, and maintain the parks are being pushed to the margins, often commuting over an hour each way from nearby Gympie, Cooroy, or further afield where rents are more manageable. It's a textbook case of what urban economists call rural gentrification, a town transformed not by industry, but by lifestyle migration and speculative investment, pricing out the very people who keep it functioning. 4. Broome. Let's shift gears again, this time to Broome, a remote town in Western Australia known for its red dirt, turquoise waters, and purling history. But behind the postcard imagery lies one of the country's most precarious rental markets. In 2024, Broome's median weekly rent hit $920, according to data from the Real Estate Institute of Western Australia. That puts it above the capitals of Adelaide, Perth, and Hobart, a staggering statistic for a town of around 14,000 people. But Broome's rental crisis is layered and complex. One major pressure point is the chronic shortage of adequate housing for Indigenous communities, many of whom live in overcrowded or substandard dwellings. Add to that a significant population of fly-in, fly-out workers supporting the mining and resources sector, who inflate demand without contributing to the long-term housing stock. Aging infrastructure and limited new developments have only made things worse. What makes Broome unique, though, is its extreme seasonal volatility. During the wet season, demand slows and rents dip. But in the dry season, when tourists and contract workers flood in, rents can spike dramatically. It's a rental roller coaster that makes financial planning nearly impossible for locals. A 2023 Kimberley Development Commission report found that 37% of renters in Broome were in rental stress, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on housing. That's 1 in 3 people. For a community with a significant Indigenous population, high unemployment, and limited services, that level of stress isn't just unsustainable, it's dangerous. 5. Margaret River. Nestled in the southwest corner of Western Australia, Margaret River is famous for its vineyards, surf breaks, and gourmet scene. But behind the postcard-perfect scenery is a town grappling with a quietly devastating rental crisis. In 2024, the median weekly rent in Margaret River surged to $890, a 38% increase in just 2 years. This is a town with just over 9,000 residents. It wasn't built for rapid growth. It wasn't built for city-sized rent prices. The perfect storm here mirrors other tourist hotspots: a booming short-stay market, a bottleneck in housing approvals, and a growing population of remote workers looking to swap the city for the coast. What's unique about Margaret River, though, is its dependency on seasonal workers, for wineries, for hospitality, for farming. And those workers, they're being priced out of the very region their labor supports. A local survey in 2023 found that over 60% of small businesses in Margaret River reported difficulty hiring staff because of housing shortages. And it's not just workers affected. Older residents on fixed incomes are being squeezed too. Pensioners are now joining the ranks of the housing insecure, unable to compete with rising rents and investors chasing short-term gains. The irony? A town globally renowned for its sense of community is becoming unaffordable for the very people who sustain it. 6. Airlie Beach. Now let's head back east, to Airlie Beach in Queensland. Gateway to the Whitsundays, Airlie Beach is a magnet for domestic and international tourists alike. But in 2024, it also became one of the most expensive towns in Queensland to rent in, with median weekly rents hovering around $920 for houses. This represents an increase of nearly 45% since 2021. Why such a steep climb? 3 key reasons. First, Airlie's rental stock is extremely limited. Much of the existing housing is either locked into holiday accommodation or owned by investors who use it part-time. Second, tourism has rebounded post-pandemic, faster than many expected, leading to a sharp demand for seasonal workers. But with little housing available, many live in overcrowded share houses, tents, or converted vans. Third, there's a speculative boom underway. Property prices have surged, pushing up rents in tandem. Many investors are betting on Airlie's future as the next Byron, and pricing accordingly. But locals aren't celebrating. A 2023 community consultation found that over 70% of residents believed the housing market was no longer meeting the needs of the community. Teachers are leaving. Retail shops are shortening hours. Even tourism businesses, supposedly the lifeblood of the area, are struggling to staff up. Airlie Beach is beautiful, but increasingly, it's becoming exclusive and exclusionary. 7. Hobart and surrounds. Hobart isn't a town, but its surrounding regional areas have made headlines. Take Queenstown, once a struggling mining town, now rebounding as a cultural and ecotourism spot. Rents there rose over 40% in 3 years. Even smaller communities like Cygnet and Hoonville have seen rents jump by $150 to $200 per week. Tasmania, often thought of as Australia's affordable option, now faces one of the country's tightest rental markets. In early 2024, Hobart's vacancy rate was just 0.3%. So when city rents rise, pressure spills over into the regional towns. For many Tasmanians, it feels like their last affordable options are vanishing. What's fueling these price surges? It's tempting to blame tourism or remote workers for this rental crisis, but that's only part of the picture. The real causes are deeper. First, housing supply hasn't kept up. Building approvals across regional Australia have lagged behind population growth since 2016. Second, short-term rentals like Airbnb have converted long-term housing into tourist accommodation, especially in coastal towns. A 2022 study by the University of Sydney found that every 10 new Airbnb listings in a region were associated with a 1.5% increase in rent. Third, infrastructure hasn't scaled. Many towns lack the roads, schools, and hospitals to support rapid growth, limiting further housing development. And finally, Australia's property market incentives heavily favor investors. Negative gearing and capital gains tax discounts encourage the holding of property for profit, not public good. Put simply, the system is designed to reward scarcity. Can anything be done? Yes, but it requires political will. Some towns are fighting back. The Byron Shire Council passed laws capping short-term holiday letting to 90 days per year. It's been challenged, of course, by tourism bodies and property owners. In Victoria, the state government introduced a short-stay levy, 10% of earnings on Airbnb-style rentals. Starting in 2025, that money will go to building affordable housing. Other solutions being discussed: inclusionary zoning, requiring developers to include affordable housing in new builds; rent caps or controls, particularly in regional crisis zones; massive public housing investment, akin to post-war policies in the 1950s. But without nationwide coordination, local councils are often left to fight multinational property platforms alone. If you're not from one of these towns, you might wonder, why should I care? Because this isn't just a rural issue. It's a warning. Australia's housing market is no longer just about cities versus regions. It's a pressure system, where affordability crises flow outward like ripples. The more unaffordable cities become, the more pressure falls on regional areas. And when regional towns become unaffordable, there is nowhere left to go. Eventually, the system collapses under its own weight. A home is more than shelter. It's stability, it's dignity, it's a right. Yet in the richest, most developed parts of Australia, thousands are locked out of housing in towns they grew up in, worked in, served in. What kind of country do we become when our teachers, nurses, and baristas can't afford to live among us? Australia has a choice to make, not just about property, but about values. Will we continue to treat homes as commodities to be traded, or communities to be preserved? The answer will shape not just the housing market, but the soul of this nation. If this video resonated with you, subscribe for more deep dives into Australia's social and economic undercurrents. Drop a comment below. Have you seen rent prices explode in your town? What's the solution? Until next time, stay informed, stay grounded, and keep asking the big questions.